This is Recovery Lifestyles with Carmel. Recovery Lifestyles is committed to raising awareness and ending stigmas surrounding addiction and mental health. These are stories from women around the world who have overcome and are now living inspiring and on-purpose lives. Today's guest, Melanie McDaniel, studied biology as a pre-med student before finding the world of natural healing. Melanie holds a family homeopathy practitioner certification as well as certifications in sports nutrition, theta healing, and Bach flower. Today, Melanie and I will be delving deep into her experiences with childhood mental, physical, and sexual abuse. I'm here today with Melanie McDaniel. She is the co-founder with her life and business partner at consciously.org. Melanie is passionate about choice. She believes that you can't unknow something even if it is somewhere deep within yourself. She is aggressively enthusiastic about self-exploration and healing. Throughout her life, she has seen many people turn a blind eye to things, which perpetuates the problems. Melanie is the person who chooses to look at them. So Melanie, welcome. Thank you for being here with me today. And would you like to share with the audience a little bit about who you are and your story?
Oh, thank you, thank you. I have kind of a mediocre story. It's very much just the more I scratch the surface, the more things there was. I had a pretty normal childhood if you went and looked at it, and then I started realizing that it wasn't so normal. As I hit my 20s and late teens, I started realizing, oh, okay, some of these stories that I have aren't okay. And as much trauma as there were divorced parents and just other custody battle type things, there was so much more happening behind the scenes than anybody knew about or chose to acknowledge. And so I went to college and I wanted to be in the Western medical community. And as I started unpacking my trauma and realizing what PTSD looks like, I went to a more natural route, and now it led me to today, where it's holistic healing and really embracing all those different sides and parts and moving to a new paradigm of living.
So are you willing to go a little bit deeper into your story? I just believe that there's many people out there that have so much shame behind their story. And I feel like somebody like you that is willing to share and you're out there, and there's so much power in that. So what were the little things, the undercurrents in your childhood that you began to recognize later on in life as PTSD symptoms?
Well, I always held stuff together. I was great in a crisis. I went to school to be a trauma surgeon initially because I was so good in a crisis. So first and foremost, I just didn't deal with anything. I didn't process it. Anything that did happen happened, and then it was over, and then you just didn't worry about it because it was over. And so when I was in college, it was the first place I was really safe. And the first time I was around people who would hear a story and kind of make a face. I'm like, why are you making a face like that? I'm like, because that's not an okay story. I'm like, oh, I didn't know. And so my parents were divorced when I was about 4 or 5 years old. And it was just a really rough custody battle. I was in court-ordered therapy between the ages of 5 and 18. For all kinds of reasons, dealing with different types of abuse. So there was a lot of mental, emotional abuse, and then the unproven stuff that was going on that related to all of those was physical and sexual abuse. And so I repressed a lot of that. I just didn't know what to do with it, and I didn't have the tools. And somebody might say, well, you were in therapy your entire life. Like, how did you not have the tools? Part of it was that it wasn't okay to talk about. The first time that I told a therapist what was happening, he raped me in his office. And so it taught me that it wasn't okay to talk about what was going on at home. That safe space wasn't real. and everything from being told you're going to be killed if you talk about this, to just the manipulation and the gaslighting of getting people to stay quiet about things and really making them small and making them scared. It just completely dominated my entire life. It's what I was raised in. So as I became an adult, I started seeing what it was and realizing that it wasn't the only way to live and the only way to operate. And frankly, that came with like massive breakdowns, like complete psychotic type breakdown of panic attack and running into the therapy office on campus, just like, I'm having repressed memories coming back. I don't know what's real. I don't know anything anymore. And just continuing to go through enough of those massive events till they got further away and further apart.
So, and I believe this has a lot to do with what you and your life partner do within your business as well. As I hear you talking about how your body was reacting, how you were so desensitized to, you know, your story, which was absolutely traumatic, that people are reacting to you. And when they're reacting to you, is that when your body started reacting? Is that kind of when you started to recognize?
It wasn't in people's reactions. That was more of like, I was curious. I remember there was a time I was with a group and they were talking about soccer and how heading the ball was scary. And we were watching this game and I said, yeah, you know, I used to be really afraid of that. And I was duct taped to the wall and had balls thrown at me because you're not allowed to be scared.
Yeah.
And their faces just were so grim. And I was like, what happened? Like, what did I miss? I didn't even understand why there was a reaction. I didn't get that. And so when I stepped away from it, I was just curious. I was just confused. I didn't understand that at all. When I had the really visceral reactions were when I was triggered by something. I was in a doctor's office and I'd had a lot of UTIs and just urinary tract stuff going on. And I went into this specialist and he said, how have you been recovering? And I was like, what do you mean, how have I been recovering? And he said, you have documented sexual abuse. How have you been recovering? And I just broke down. My heart was pounding. I was just a ghost. I can feel it kind of come up now, even though it's been years.
Yeah.
And that was the first time that I, as an adult, acknowledged things that I knew that I had locked away. And it was there in black and white. You know, it wasn't something that I was making up or running away from, and not being able to run away from that reality is what triggered the panic attack. And I started driving and I couldn't function. I just literally could not function at all and had to stop, and was able to get someone on the phone to come and get me and take me to a psychiatrist. And my friend was like, I don't know what's happening here.
And what a blessing in disguise, because I feel that there's a lot of us in the recovery community that just, we have been told and we've been gaslighted to believe that these things were not true and didn't happen to us. And how sad is that? You know, it breaks my heart.
You're trying to convince me that my reality is not real.
Yeah.
When you're being manipulated that way, you have somebody, especially when it's a parent, that is telling you that what you believe isn't true. And that fundamentally alters your ability to interact with the world, because you have been taught that you don't know what's real. Mm-hmm. You've been taught that you can't trust yourself. And being taught that means, well, I can't make any decisions. I have to trust you. If you say this is okay, this is how, this is what love looks like, or this is just what you do. The first time I chose to have sex, I was like, that's not sex. That's just what happens when, you know, this person loves you. And I didn't realize that I had lost my virginity when I was 10 years old. And so it's all of those things that make you unable to have a sense of gravity in your own world.
Mm-hmm. So how does somebody, and this could be from your experience, because you have this awesome saying that I love, that's, you know, you've gone from survival mode to healing mode to now thriving mode. So how does somebody that is just starting to recognize that, you know, they might have sexual abuse that has happened to them, they may have mental abuse, they may have, right? There's so much that's coming to light these days. What's the first thing that they can do? Where do they start?
So this is going to be the most like counterintuitive thing that I will say. And people even now are like, really, that's what you think? Don't talk about it. So there's a lot out there that share your story and talk about this. When you are fresh, when it is new, when you are not sure what's happening, one of the most damaging, dangerous things is talking about it to the wrong people. Because when you don't have enough of a grasp on how you're feeling, their reaction shapes your feeling of it. When I say, I feel like I've got these memories coming back to me and I know they're real, but it's so hard for me to acknowledge them, and your friend starts going off about it and saying, you know, this is so horrible and all this stuff, you lose your own relationship with your reality. And a lot of people are ill-equipped. They can't handle hearing things. Most people can't hear your reality and be supportive. When I was going to therapy during my healing piece, one of the things the therapist said is, you've experienced two traumas. You've experienced the trauma from childhood, and then you've experienced the trauma as an adult from trying to talk about that trauma. My entire family had about a year where I had to really distance myself from everyone because of how they reacted, because of just they're not being equipped. And so find a therapist, go to rain.org or .com, I don't remember.
Okay.
But going to different sites, reaching out to, you know, people on podcasts and saying like, hey, you've interviewed some people, give me, who can you recommend? And trying to find that one person that can hear it. There's even Talkspace now and like free things, but finding one person to talk to, or a couple of people that can hear that conversation and react without imparting their reaction is really important. People react so much, and then you end up having to take care of other people when you're like, I came to you because I'm in distress right now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that happens no matter where you are in your recovery. I was just thinking as you were talking and explaining that process, how I recently have done that myself, where I shared what was going on. And I feel that that's something that we do in the beginning of recovery, is because we've never been heard. We've been told it's not true. We haven't been validated for what happened to us. And so we're just like telling everybody who will listen, right? Because you're almost trying to get validation. Would you agree with that? Is that?
I think what we want, and I don't know if validation is the best word for it, because I feel like it's kind of a loaded word.
Mm-hmm.
I think what I wanted at least was, I've been told my whole life that I was the problem and I was the one who was crazy and I was the one who didn't know what was real. So I'm doing my due diligence. I'm saying, this is how I'm feeling. If I get 3 other people to be able to point out, like, here's a red flag in what you're saying, here's this, then I'm like, well, then maybe I'm not the one who's losing my mind.
Right.
Can you read this email and tell me what it says? It says this. Okay, so I'm not just misinterpreting it. And I think what we want, even more than validation, is just somebody to check for ourselves that we're not crazy. If we can go, oh, okay, so that there is something to this, then we can start piecing it together and start acknowledging it in a different way. But when we seek that, when we go to the wrong people and then they just flip that back on top of us, it just perpetuates everything we were already feeling.
Yeah. And that can put you in a real state of anger, which isn't, I mean, I believe that a little bit of anger is healthy, especially when you're first coming through this, because when you're like, oh, yeah, this is true. I'm not crazy, right? You kind of go into that space of anger. But when you allow people to put their stuff on, it keeps you in that anger. And
Yeah,
so,
but they make you take care of them. You know, it's you're the one bringing this up and you're the one bringing this trauma. And most of these things, not most, but a huge piece are within a family. And so it's kind of like, I remember my uncle said, we love you, but we love your mom first. And I was like, so you can't hear me and I don't matter?
right.
Because no matter what, it's not an incident among these people. There is loyalties. There are all these other dynamics within each person. And so I think as much as it's kind of counterintuitive, one of the best things that people can do when they first start recognizing they're in survival mode is to not overshare. Find the right person that is safe to talk to and try to keep it in that space.
So, and we'll have links to your site so that anybody that's listening, they can reach out to you or contact you, or myself even, we can help direct you in the right direction for sure of where to go. So let's go on to the healing piece.
Oh, the healing. The healing is so intense, you know, it's it's one of those things that sounds like soft and sweet. And I think a lot of people have this idea that being in a healing process is gentle. It's not. Being in a healing process is, we've got a huge gash in our leg, huge gash. We're barely able to walk and we've just let it scab over and we're limping. That's in survival mode. Healing mode isn't your leg is all better. Healing mode is we need to open this wound back up and clean it out and scrape everything out and stitch you up and then go to rehab and put you in a leg cast for 6 weeks until you can walk again. And so I think there's just an off from the beginning kind of misidentification of what healing process looks like, because it's the work, it's effort. And for me, I was so numb. I was so numb. And to feel is awful at first. I mean, just the worst thing ever. And you just go, I would love to be numb again today, but I have to feel all this sadness. And then you start feeling joy and you realize, for the first time in my life, I cried a happy tear. I didn't know what that was like. I've seen it in movies. And you start living in this place of duality, of really working with the heavy, dark, scraping out the wound and seeing how beautiful and nurturing and loving the world can be and how much better there is out there. Being able to choose and to stand up and to feel really grounded and assertive. It's that feeling of, I'm the immovable object and you're not going to push me anymore. And it's not aggressive, it's not mean, it's just steady. And you start feeling that more and more. You start being able to help others. You start being able to see your life coming together. And then one day you wake up and you realize, oh, I'm happy a lot more than I'm sad. I am healthy a lot more than I'm unhealthy. I am not sure when my last trigger was. And you start moving into that thriving mode where everything starts to blossom. And that's not to say that it's 100% perfect all the time, but there's just this calm steadiness in that I know I can make it through anything that does come up. And I love that I can't remember the last time something did.
So what advice do you give to somebody living in this fast-paced world when the healing piece requires us to slow down? What kind of advice do you have, or what advice do you have for somebody that's struggling with that?
It's hard because there is the reality of like, I've got to pay rent. I've got to do these different things, but it's zooming in and zooming out. You've got to be able to start working with your lens and realizing, okay, right here, I do need to make this phone call, but right here, this phone call doesn't matter. If I die right now, I'm not going to be upset that this phone call didn't happen or I missed a podcast. I'm going to be upset that I didn't have the relationship I wanted to have, that I didn't feel peace, that I didn't feel happiness. And so we have to toggle reality of day to day and the bigger picture, and be able to go back and forth on those things. And some really simple things are just scheduling and time, being able to manage your time differently, being able to say, okay, I'm not answering my phone after 4 o'clock. Being able to just bite the bullet, be vulnerable, and ask for help. That doesn't mean I have to offload my whole story onto someone, but call in sick to work. Tell your manager, I'm going through a healing crisis right now, and I really need to be able to take it a little bit easier. Do you have any ideas on how I could make the workday a little easier for myself? Call a friend and have them watch your kids. People in your life want to support you. They just don't know how to support you. But if you say, this is what I need, they will usually give it to you. And when they can't, that tells you what you need to know.
Yeah, and I think that's the cool part about this process, is that when you're in that healing and you're transitioning into that thriving space, is that we now have choices, right?
Yeah.
We're now empowered.
Or cruel.
We were cruel to ourselves. So yeah, it was about how we have now choices. You know, we're now in a place of empowered, that we don't have to feel guilt and shame for choosing ourselves. And you and I were talking on, I think, the very first time we talked about this really cool concept that you've created, that you do with your clients. And it's called, I think it was called the passports. Is that right?
Customs form. The
customs form.
Yes.
Yeah.
So this is important, and this is a very evolving thing. I am the queen and president and emperor and whatever of my land. So in Melanie land, I have rules. Like, I live there, and I get to have rules. And so in my country, there is a boundary. There's a border around that. And you can't get in unless you go through customs. Going through customs means you have a customs form. And it's not, you're not allowed into my space, or I want these people. It's just a very neutral, here are my values. Here are the requirements of this country. If you make it through, great, welcome. If you don't, great, goodbye. It's not aggressive, where a lot of people kind of have this, you've got walls and you've got barriers. Yeah, I've got walls and barriers. They have a door, and there is a gatekeeper. You just have to make it past the gatekeeper. And so the customs form starts taking shape and evolving the more we know who we are. When we start valuing things and we start realizing what we really want and what we're really okay with. I value choice. If somebody says things have to be a certain way, they might not make it into my country, because there are infinite possibilities and you have a choice in every one. I value taking care of children. If you are not willing to face that maybe even a nephew of yours is getting physically abused by their family members, and you're just like, well, that's not my problem, I need to give them their privacy, you're not allowed in my country. In my country, about that. And so those are things that I have. And some people might say, well, you have high standards, or you have, walls that you've built around people. I'm fine with that. I'm fine with having those standards. And it evolves as we get to know what we really want coming through those revolving doors. And then when everything is in your country and you've made the customs form, there comes a time when you kind of go, okay, everybody who's here needs to go back through customs. We just need to do a check. Some of you may be deported. But it's neutral. It's not I hate you, get out. It's, I'm sorry, we just are misaligned on our values and you can't come in today.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to later, you're welcome to.
I think what I love about this so much is that it really helps me too, define what are my boundaries, what are my values, and helps recognize the people in your life that don't maybe respect your values. And a lot of times it's because their boundaries are broken. So I think it's just such a cool awareness tool, and I absolutely love it. So that's why I wanted you to share it here today.
It is an awareness tool. And I mean, and it even goes to, we can share this. You were sharing with me something earlier before we talked and had this feeling like, oh, I don't want to offend you. That's my job in my country. And in my country, people who feel, who make me responsible for their feelings need to take a class. They need to take like a culture class before they come in. we make sure that we have an awareness that I'm not mad at you. I recognize that something you said or did has triggered something in me, and I get to reflect on that. That's an important value in my country. Mm. And so everything that we do, every process that we have is kind of that ownership and non-ownership. I'm a victim in certain ways, and I get to be taken care of and feel safe. I also get to take responsibility for my life in different ways. And the hard part is that a lot of people get really pissed off when you kick them out. They don't like being deported, and they don't like it when they're not allowed in. But that's the customs guards deal. They get to deal with that. I get to stay neutral in my space.
Awesome. So is there anything on your heart as we, begin to wrap this up that you feel you really would love to share?
I really wish that people could experience the waves more gently. There's so much. I attribute every ounce of my healing process to continuing it. No matter how bad it was, no matter how scary or hard or ecstatic pieces of it were, it's just keep swimming, just keep going, keep moving, and learn to do that gently. The wave is going to come. The wave of guilt, of shame, of judgment, of fear, of sadness, of abandonment. All those waves are going to come, but they are going to leave. They are going to ebb and they are going to flow. And if we can just give ourselves a little bit of permission to go through it, and to support other people going through it. A lot of times we really want to calm people down when they're upset. And sometimes it's like, hey, you're upset. I close the doors so no one can hear you scream. Here's a pillow. Have at it. Like, let people get these things out. Let people go through these processes and be nurturing and gentle and loving during it.
So I trust that everyone listening today is going to receive from you exactly what they need. And if they feel called to reach out to you, how can they do that?
Consciously.org.
Consciously.org.
Yeah, that's simple. Booking site is on there. We do free consultations. Someone can just sign up. They can send us an email, whatever they'd like.
Awesome. And I'll have that link for everybody under the video as well. So Mekita, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much. I'm so grateful to be here and to be able to share with your community. And I wish everybody so much goodness and wellness and healing and love.